have a couple new books that I've recently acquired. A recent favorite, like a recently read book that has made it to my favorites shelf, which is very short. I think there's 15 books in total on the favorites shelf on Goodreads, and this earned a spot, so that's wonderful. And then a little bit of a discussion, but also just kind of update, I suppose, on the book that I'm currently reading that's taking me longer to read than I typically take to read a book, but is also like twice as long as a book I would normally pick up. My foray into reading bigger books and kind of what I think the quitting social media thing has done for me when it comes to appreciating longer novels and picking up bigger books as opposed to subconsciously kind of going for short novels just so I can read more. Lots to talk about, but let's get started with the books that I've recently acquired, two of which were from a like street sale. What do you call that? A flea market? People selling their old belongings for super cheap. That. So I've read Lord of the Flies by William Golding, but I just didn't have a physical copy of it because I think I read it on ebook in high school, and I actually thought about it quite recently. I was like, oh, a little bit strange that I don't have a physical copy of that because it is something I've read and maybe at some point would like to go back to. And lucky me, I found this for €1 today, and it has a really interesting spooky cover. I love secondhand books. This also has some water damage that is like fun and interesting and adds character. I also found Tennessee Williams's A Streetcar Named Desire. I was like, I'm just gonna pick this up. It was €1. I'm very happy with this. And then my two new purchases that were not €1, sadly. Stoner by John Williams. I've heard great things about this. It's like a modern classic with heavy, I think, existentialist themes, and I love stuff like that. It's right up my alley. And then Joan Didion's Slouching Towards Bethlehem. I actually picked this up like 2 days ago because I saw a very compelling and intriguing video about this collection of essays. I've never read anything by Joan Didion, so I'm a total noob, total amateur, but this person was really convincing me on it. So I immediately ordered it, picked it up the next day, and then I read one of the essays already, which was on self-respect, which I actually really enjoyed. I mean, it didn't blow me away or anything, but it was very interesting. And now I'm thinking I'm just gonna start the book from just chronological order because I've already read an essay that was like in the middle, but I think I'm just gonna go back to the start and just make my way through the essays. No rush or anything, just enjoying the vibes. And the book that has kind of made its way onto my favorites shelf in a way that I wouldn't have expected, because this is a book I found out about probably from Book Talk, and usually, not always, but usually the books I have read from Book Talk have been kind of letdowns, sometimes very much so. But this was not a letdown at all. I'm just gonna keep this brief because I imagine you guys have probably read this already. It was super popular on the internet like last year maybe. So I'm sure you've read it already, but if you haven't, you have to. Well, if this sounds good to you, of course. This book follows two time-traveling agents, Red and Blue, on opposite sides of a war that is like literally a time war. They like comb through strands of time or realities and they adjust things. But they're just agents. They're both just following orders, and they're both on opposite ends of this war. At the very start of the book, they start exchanging letters that are kind of taunting because they're enemies and rivals, and then they keep exchanging letters, and then that turns into something much more soft and romantic. However, it is so cleverly written. It is so beyond interesting, like the setting and what they're doing, like their tasks, and also trying to figure out what the hell they're doing and what is the red side and what is the blue side. That is something that comes up and is definitely not the front end of the story for sure. And in that sense, you're not going to get a lot. There's not going to be a lot of world building. You're just thrown into it, like thrown into the middle of this war, because it is a romance kind of at the heart of it, but it has so many cool sci-fi elements that I absolutely loved. And the prose is so strange because the agents aren't really humans, so they talk kind of weird. Go into this knowing you're supposed to be confused for most of it. When I finished this, I was like, oh my god, time to start it again, which is something I don't usually feel when I finish a book, so pretty special. Also, it's sapphic. The agents are like female agents. So that's super fun. And then for about 2 weeks, I've been reading East of Eden by John Steinbeck, something I wouldn't have guessed. I wouldn't have guessed that this year I would be reading East of Eden. But something happened to me ever since I deleted the social media apps off of my phone. My relationship with reading has developed in a way that is so wonderful, that is so intentional. I've found so much fulfillment in just enjoying my time with the book and not really caring how long it's going to take me to read it, and not stressing about the page count or my reading challenge. I didn't really realize that I was so stressed about stuff like that in the back of my head. But when I look at all the books I've read this year, I've mostly read short books this year. Given all of these musings that I've been having while reading East of Eden, this came at me at the perfect time in my life because I'm loving it so unexpectedly involved in the story. I got completely sucked in very early on and just loving that this is Steinbeck's magnum opus, and it's like the book that he always wanted to write, and all the other books he wrote were just practice for this one. Like, there's something about that that is wonderful. Very much anticipating that this will be a 5 stars. I'm only halfway through. There's 300 pages to go, so I don't know. I really hope it's the case. This is a lot of people's favorite novel, and I can definitely understand why. It's like a multi-generational tale. It's kind of a retelling of book 4 of Genesis. So in case you're familiar, that's the story of Abel and Cain. The characters jump off the page. The characters are so interesting. So interesting. The character work in this one is just fascinating. And that's kind of where I'm at right now with my reading. Like, I want to read all the big books that I've always wanted to read, but we're like, no, it's gonna take me too long. I won't be able to finish my Goodreads reading challenge, which now, when I think back on it, that's very silly that I would think that way and not really question why I was thinking that way. Because yes, life is very short, but life is very long too. I definitely have enough time to read all the big books I want to read in my life, and I shouldn't let the idea that I don't have enough time for that to get in the way of trying. But I also think that being on TikTok and those types of apps that offer you such instant gratification take away from the enjoyment of things that are a little bit slower to deliver deeper gratification, of course, but it's just like you have this source of cheap gratification or cheap dopamine or whatever you want to say, whatever you want to call it. I think next year I'm not going to go for a numerical reading goal at all because I just don't want to incentivize the kind of thinking that would lead me to pick up only shorter or quicker reads. For me right now, I'm like, even though I haven't finished East of Eden yet, I've been enjoying every step of the way so very much, and I'm getting so much out of that, and I'm not just waiting for the moment I finish the book and I can say that I've read it. I'm actually just enjoying the process, and that is a lovely place to be.